Greetings, Zinesters. Today I'll be reviewing these two feminist-themed zines and discussing not only the zine specifically, but also highlighting a few of the important academic topics and principles that they relate to in the discussions of society's unbalanced gender norms and beliefs. The two zines that I'll be discussing today are Better Feminism Workbook and We Need Emotional Labor, both of which are by Jennifer Williams. The reason that I decided to choose two zines instead of just one is because both focus around the same central topic of our society's growing demand for communities to redistribute more evenly the responsibilities of interpersonal problem solving so that they don't solely fall on the women within the community. And they're written also by the same author, so a lot of the concepts and objections and discussions relate nicely and overlap with each other as well. And since the zines I'm sharing with you all today also supply us with a workbook aspect with questions and they want you to kind of provide the answers, I'll also be sharing a few of my own answers and thoughts to some of those questions. I'm going to begin with the topic of how I'm choosing to define communities when referring to them. This zine seems to be addressing those of Western society's working class and corporate environments, a little bit more specifically, mainly American working class and corporate societies, and also really kind of focuses on those that are both very much familiar and maybe not so much familiar with the ideas and principles of our new wave feminist movement, the third wave feminist movement. It kind of, targets both audiences on both ends, those that are, probably very much familiar with it and those that aren't and trying to become a little bit more familiar. So that's great, kind of all aspects of the spectrum there. Let's see. Let's discuss the topic first of how many of our communities have this growing need for what's considered emotional labor, both in terms of it as being considered a necessary skill set for every citizen to master in order to better communicate among each other in our daily lives successfully, and in terms of that necessary skill set being more widely taught and exercised so that a lot of the workload is more evenly shared. First, I'm going to define emotional labor. And the author of these zines defines emotional labor as the method of managing feelings and communications to accomplish the emotional aspects and relationships that are required within a typical workplace environment. She defines that a little bit more clearly within this one. Obviously, we need emotional labor, and in the introduction part, more or less, she goes into a little bit more detail here and whatnot, and kind of sums it up for us all in there. Much of today's emotional labor workload is carried out by female employees, and emotional labor is mentally exhausting. It's hard work, and especially when the duty is not being consistently shared, or when many of you and your coworkers' relationships are toxic or strained due to a lot of the emotional dismissiveness. Another big issue that Jennifer Williams discusses in We Need Emotional Labor zine is others' high lack of regard and responsibility for their own poor communication skills, and how that affects every individual they have a relationship with. Thus, the issue needing to be addressed by all members within our community, and even though someone may just not want to deal with and or face their feelings, doesn't mean that they do not still feel them, and that doesn't have an effect on them, and thus affect others. A few of our assigned course texts and ideas that really relate well with this is Brenda Helmbert and Meredith Love's text, The Bustin' and Bitchin' 'n' 'Eth of Third Wave Zines. Thus, the issue needing to be addressed by all members within our community, and even though someone may just not want to deal with and or face their feelings, doesn't mean that they do not still feel them, and that doesn't have an effect on them, and thus affect others. particularly the text philosophy regarding the various ethos that are popularly present among zines. I think there's definitely an aspect of that that's pretty clear in these. Also, Alison Pitemere's doing Third Wave Feminism zines as a public pediology of hope. Her thoughts on the importance of feminist zines to create the kind of political activism that can really lead to change, I think is something that relates well with this, because I really think that the author is trying to hone in on something like political activism to change our working environments and our current society's views on emotional labor. And let's see a couple of the questions that are asked within the Better Feminism workbook. One of them that I answered a lot of them, but two that I'd like to share is the first one, questions, how do you cultivate your self-worth? My answer was a little bit lengthy here, so I'm just going to kind of condense it. Basically, my answer was, first I think about all of the things that don't define my self-worth, or that I wouldn't consider to be something to define my self-worth. For example, things like the car I drive, or the amount of followers I have on social media platforms, things like that. And once I can get a list of things that do not, I start to consider the aspects of my life that do define my self-worth, or that I would consider to define that. Definitely things like my education, my level of respect and understanding towards and tolerance towards others, and contributions to the community and society, things like that. And then I kind of just do my best to create attainable goals, like small ones, to get me to the bigger life goals that I would like to accomplish, and that would satisfy my definition of self-worth. And within the other workbook, which is We Need Emotional Labor, which also includes questions as well, a question that I really thought about and wanted to share with you guys is, who do you tend to seek support from? Why that person or group? What I wrote down here was usually my parents and or one of my best friends of 20 years, Amy. My parents, because obviously they're somebody that are important to me, and I'll always, seek and want to have their approvals. And Amy, because she's like a sister to me, and sometimes I feel knows me better than I know myself. So those are the two zines that I reviewed, and I hope you liked my video. Thanks.